Hello, welcome to the GURPS Spaceship Design Spreadsheet tutorial. I'm Eric Smith. I'm the guy who wrote, well, all of this. This started out as a pretty small project and kind of bloomed into a very big one, and it's very complex. However, I kind of enjoy the programming aspects of it, so I've been supporting it for quite a few years now. I've been asked to do a tutorial many times, or documentation or something explaining how to use the sheet, because it did grow into a very complex project. And I've kind of put it off because I don't like writing documentation, and I just never really got around to it. I almost prefer coding over showing it off and trying to explain it. But I thought I'd do a video tutorial to see if I can help people out and see how it works out, and we'll see how this goes. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you here is my new cover page. This is new to Release Candidate 10, which isn't currently available, although it might be by the time I post this tutorial, at least for Excel. Release Candidate 10 has taken on a lot of changes, especially in the macros. And for those of you who have been following the sheet, you know that the macros are a big sticking point between Excel and OpenOffice, because I have to do a lot of rewriting of code to translate the macros from Excel into OpenOffice. Unfortunately, because of the number of changes, I've lagged way behind in updating OpenOffice's macros, and it's just not ready to be used at all. This means that I am unlikely to release a Release Candidate 10 for OpenOffice, and it might be 11 or 12 before I get around to re-updating OpenOffice. Unfortunately, it's until I get around to doing it, or feeling like doing it and slugging through it. That's just the way it's going to be. But there's a good chance I'll be putting Release Candidate 10 out there for Excel. Anyway, most of this tutorial should be pertinent to both OpenOffice and Excel. And I might do a small tutorial edition for OpenOffice to feature some of the differences, particularly in the saving and loading of files in OpenOffice. However, for now, I'm going to stick with the Excel version. Anyway, my new cover page here, you'll notice that on the bottom I list both the release candidate version and release candidate number, as well as have a quick copyright blurb. From the cover page, if you click on the image, it will take you to my alternate systems page. At this point, I'm going to do a quick overview of each of the tabs that I have in the sheet to kind of go over what they do, and then I will go into each tab separately, and I'll probably post a separate video for each sheet, each tab, explaining in detail how to use them. So here's the optional rules sheet. This sheet contains just the text description of all of the optional rules that I've come up with for GURPS Spaceships. A lot of these are little tweaks to improve the game, or some of them, such as the new semi-ablative armor option, are throwbacks to the older vehicles options that were available that weren't incorporated into spaceships. Semi-ablative, for instance, I decided to add because some spaceships, such as the Defiant in Deep Space Nine, have ablative armor, or at least are described as having ablative armor. And I wanted to be able to recreate those designs, so I added the semi-ablative option using rules taken from a combination of Vehicles 2nd Edition and GURPS 3rd Edition, or GURPS 4th Edition, and just trying to decide what would be best. Now this sheet is divided into multiple sections. The first section is alternate systems. That's alternate spaceship systems. And as you scroll down, you'll see a large number of them. And then there's a few weapon options. Here's quantum warheads. These are meant to mimic the quantum torpedoes that are featured on Star Trek Voyager. But they can also mimic high-capacity warheads of various types from all sorts of settings. And then my alternate habitat section. This has a lot of new habitat or various habitat options that are useful for just tweaking the system out. The most notable of which is my garage with vehicle. This is essentially the vehicle bay, similar to the vehicle bays in the old GURPS Traveler setup or the old vehicles. And it's really inspired by the vehicle bays in GURPS Traveler, where most all of the ships have some sort of a grab sled installed on them that allows the crew to get around once they're planet-side. Of course, being generic, I rewrote this with multiple tech levels in mind and designed utility trucks, helicopters, air cars, which is essentially an airplane, as well as super science grab plane and grab sleds to mimic multiple backgrounds and with variant designs on each. All the rules for it, of course, are right here, and you can read through them at your leisure. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, the last sections here are the mass combat and troop strength optional rule that I incorporated, and a large section on copyright notice. Of course, for this, I do take the copyright and the Steve Jackson Games rights very seriously. I try to put pointers to every product from which I'm taking rules and have a hyperlink there for you. If you click on this, it will open your web browser and take you to that page. And if you're going to use this, I highly recommend you go out and buy the PDFs for all of these. Most of them are very good reads. They have a lot of fun rules in them, a lot of fun options. So go out and buy them. Enjoy them. Anyway, that's pretty much this tab in a nutshell. The only other thing to talk about are the buttons along the top. I incorporated these because in my web browser and in most browsers, there's tabs on the top, and I wanted to have ways of going back and forth between these sheets along the top, so I put the buttons here. These buttons also allow me to run some specific macros for each of the sheets as you enter them, which can have some slight improvements in the handling of the sheet, but for the most part, it's just a convenience to maneuver around the entire sheet. Now, the next worksheet that's built into this, or the next spreadsheet that's built in this, is the design table. And the design table is where you're going to do most of the work building a ship. The design table is very densely packed with options. I will go over these in much greater detail later. But one thing I will mention is because I'm recording this in 720p, the design table is actually slightly wider than my screen width. As you can see, there's a part of a column right here showing, and I want to be able to show you everything that's on the screen. One of the features that Excel has that OpenOffice doesn't is I pre-programmed some settings for changing the width based on rough screen width as well as zoom, and that you can just quickly click on it and it changes the screen width and zoom for most sheets, most everywhere. Zoom works all right, but it tends to make the text a little blurry, at least if you zoom down. Making things bigger, of course, doesn't make them blurry, but it shows even less on the screen. So I'm going to go with 100% zoom, but I'm going to set the screen width down to 960. Now 960 pixels is actually roughly from here to here on the screen, cutting off the rightmost column. And it's good for really small monitors, but it also allows you to show the entire sheet on a 720p screen. Now the design table itself is divided into several sections. The topmost section is the design switches and features, and that's all the little check boxes and drop down menus along the top here. And for right now, I'm going to bypass most of this and just show you the quick overview. But that's all of the design switches and features. The next section is the system options. And in the system options, this has a listing of all the systems that you install on the ship all the way on the left. And then you can select individual options for each section of the ship, each ship system. There are a lot of options that show up here. Some systems have quite a few options available, and it can be tough to tell what's available and what's not. The main teller, of course, is the way I have all of these set up. The box turns gray when an option is available. These ones are white, there's no option available, whereas this one is gray and it allows you to select options. Now these options can be installed in any system, anytime, so they're available even when you haven't selected size modifier and whatnot. Whereas these options all depend on which system is specifically installed in the sheet. Another thing to note, and this applies to the design switches and features too, is quite a few cells have comments built into them. There's this little red checkbox at the upper right hand corner of the box. When you hover over it with the mouse, it brings up an explanation. In this case, telling you what options are going to be available under the options 1 column. And each one of these has its own options. You can go through and read each one so that you can get a good idea of what's going to be available. There may be some things I've forgotten to put in, or some things that have changed that haven't been updated, but for the most part this includes all of the options. Another thing worth noting is if you modify Excel or look for it in your version of Excel, there's usually a box somewhere that will allow you to show all comments. It's also available under the View menu in Excel 2000 and probably similarly placed in other versions of Excel. But when you click on that, it opens up all of the comments that are on the sheet so that you can read all of them instead of just looking at a few. And you can show and hide those at your desire. But as I said, this also applies to the switches and features, where I explain each one of these options in slightly greater detail than I had space available. And all you have to do is hover over most of these. A couple of these, this one's kind of hidden because I changed the column width too small. But it is there. And again, if you just click the show hide comments option, it will bring up all of them, and you can read through any and all of them. Now the next section in the design table is the spacecraft design table. This is where you actually select all of the options for your spaceship. The first two that you have to select are tech level and size modifier. If you don't select those, nothing else can be done for the ship. So you have to select these to build a ship. Once you select those, all of the other options begin to open, and you can select ship systems and most other options for the ship. Scrolling down, there's also a habitat section and a weapon system section, and this, as you see, has a comment explaining some stuff for the weapon systems. And if we scroll down, there's also, this is an ammo listing for the weapons, so where you can add or subtract ammo from the weapons. Again, I'll go over all this in a lot more detail. There's also 3 more sections of the ship that are hidden by default until you install a system that will show it. The auxiliary craft section, the cargo manifest section, and the open spaces section. And these are input blocks for each of these. If you install a hangar bay or one of the other systems that allows you to install an auxiliary craft, and there's a few of them available now, it will open up the auxiliary craft section where you can assign auxiliary craft to it. If you, same thing with the cargo manifest, as soon as you put in a cargo hold, steerage cargo in the habitats or uninstalled weapons in the weapon batteries, the cargo manifest will open, and that will allow you to assign cargo to the cargo manifest. And open spaces, if you install any open spaces, then you can describe the open space so that you can have a listing of what the open space is. Anyway, on to the next tab. Here's the campaign options. Now, campaign options is pretty straightforward. It basically has some switches and features on the left-hand side here and filters on the right. Oop, I went way further right than I wanted. Now, the switches and features all through here are exactly mirrored in the design table all the way at the top. Right here, campaign, design, switches, and features. And any changes you make in the design table, such as turning on Spaceships 8, will also turn on that same option here, and turning it off turns it off in the design table. This allows you to quickly set some of the primary campaign options for your ship without having to go back and forth between the design table and the campaign options. Now, the next section is very large, and it's the systems filter. The systems filter allows you to select spaceship systems that are in the rules that you do not want available for your campaign. Now, you can limit some of them by selecting tech level. For instance, exotic armor is tech level 12. So if you make your ship tech level 11, these exotic armor won't be available. However, other ones, such as indestructible, are simply described as super science. So if you choose any super science tech level, indestructible armor will be available, and for your campaign you might not want it available. So you can set up a filter here under the filter column to make it unavailable. And once you do that, it won't be available for any ship as long as you keep and load these campaign options. And again, I'm going to go over this in a lot more detail, but there's filters and cost multipliers for most of the systems. There's, well, for all of the systems. There's all similar setup for habitat modules with filters, cost listing, and cost multiplier. Weapons have filters, but not a cost multiplier because weapons are part of the weapon battery, so the cost doesn't directly come out of the weapons selection. But there's also warhead selection right here, which is a continuation of weapons, and those do have a cost associated with them, so they have a cost multiplier. And then various ships features, which also have a cost associated with them, so you can set a cost multiplier. And then fuel types down below. And fuel types you can both filter out or set cost multipliers for based on whatever cost you want. And if you scroll to the right more, there is an input section for new fuel types and new beam weapon types. Now, the new fuel types are pretty simple. You just need a name, a cost, and to decide whether or not the fuel is volatile. This is a simple true-false statement. And then there's the beam weapons. This is a little bit more complex, and I'll get into this again when I come back to the campaign options. The main thing with this is it uses the standard descriptions that are used in the book. D-damage in spaceships has DDAM 1, 2, and 3 columns, so you need to select which one it's going to use. Armor divisor, there's only a few that are listed in the book. Infinity, which is ignoring armor, or one of the other options. Damage type is pretty limited as well. Range, there's 4 range columns, range 0 through range 3 in the book. Space act from -10 to +10. Recoil 1 to 10. So you can set the basic options, select the name, and then this weapon system will be available to you when you select weapons. There's also output multipliers here for DDAM and range. This one, some of the weapon systems say use DDAM 1 but multiply beam output by 10. So you would put a 10 here to multiply the beam weapon before figuring the damage. Same thing for range. You might multiply the DDAM by 10 but the range by 1/10. So you would put 0.1 for 1/10 there, and then it would have a higher damage but shorter range than would be expected based on the tables. Anyway, as I said, I'll go over this with examples later. For now, I'm just going to move on to the next section, which is the output sheet. Now, the output sheet is very simple. It's divided into 3 columns: HTML, plain text, and BB code, which is used on the Steve Jackson Game forums. Basically, all you need to do is select everything in that column that's got text in it, right-click to select copy, and then paste it into wherever you're going to paste it. In the case of HTML, you'll paste it into your HTML editor, although I will note in my experience, sometimes pasting from Microsoft Excel into Microsoft Front Page will paste a bunch of crap code when you do that. And the way to get around that is to paste it into Notepad first, where it will paste just the plain text, then copy it from Notepad into Front Page, and it will paste just the plain text into the HTML section, and you have all the coding that you need for the ship. Plain text, this is all aligned with spaces. So there's a lot of extra spaces in here that get input just for alignment purposes, but it's all completely plain text output for your ship. And then BB code. And BB code, again, is for the forums. This has a lot of little formatting tweaks to help things show up better on the forums. And again, I'll go over this just a little bit later as I go through the tabs. Now, the next 3 tabs are all essentially the same. There's Save Ships, Save Ships to, and Official Ships. These are 3 sheets which you can save your designs from the design table into. Now, the design table allows you to load one ship in full detail and make changes to it. However, one ship at a time is very slow. It's not very useful in a lot of ways, especially when you're trying to build a lot of ships or build variant ships. So I created the save sheets. The save sheets can store up to 256 ships in each one. And once you start saving into them, they do tend to quickly fill up with all of your variants. Save Ships is completely empty. This is set up just for you to save your own ships into. I do not plan on using the Save Ships sheet at all at any point in the future. That way you have a place where you can save your ships. Save Ships 2, on the other hand, I have all of my designs that I use for within the spreadsheet in my optional rules. All of the vehicle garages are designed using the spaceship rules. They're all size modifier 3.5 ships that I designed using these rules, and that you can load them into spaceships and look at the full design instead of just the quick blurb that's available in the optional rules. Now, also included here, and I'm going to get rid of the skill column in a second to show you, but I also have a few ships that are from Pyramid Magazine because there wasn't enough room in the official ships for those. Official ships there are currently 255 ships in the official ships. That covers everything from spaceships 1 through 8 and the Vorkosigan Saga role-playing game. I probably butchered that name pronunciation. But once you stack all of those ships together, there's 255 of them. The sheet can hold 256 ships. So there just wasn't enough room for the extra dozen or so ships in the pyramid articles. So I'm going to get rid of the skill column real quick. And I'll bring up the name filter just to show you. You can filter this by name, size modifier, and tech level. And you can also change the sort order. Again, I'll go over this a little bit more as I get into the save ships. But just to show you real quick with the name filter, if you put in P3/, this will filter out everything with P3/ in the name or the page. Page reference for Pyramid 3 is P3/. So here are the Pyramid 3 ships that I have input into the sheet. And I'm going to get rid of that filter real quick. I just wanted to show that little bit off. Now there's also troop strength columns, which are further off to the right. And if you have a bigger monitor, 1080p, this shows up a little better. But I've got troop strength and then the classes and features of ships. Air, space, some of them have a lot of features, some of them just have a few. And it all depends on what you choose as you design the ship. But you don't have to show that column. It's there if you want it, and you can hide it if you don't. Same thing with the show skills column. Now, in the open office version, the skills column cannot be hidden, and that's because there's a little tweak I had to do with this sheet in order to make it so you could load ships from it. And I hid some code up in here, which you can see when I select those. So the skills column is necessary to be shown just so you can access those features. But in Excel, the skills column is optional, so it can be hidden just to make things a little smaller so you can scroll around without having to spend too much time. Now once we get past official ships, the next one is user systems. And user systems is another extremely densely packed page with a lot of information in it. This one, it looks like my formatting got butchered slightly here. I'm going to have to tweak that because these are supposed to all line up nicely. But that's neither here nor there for the moment. This page allows you to input new ship systems that you can then select as you build your ship, complete with all the stats for the system. And there's a lot of little tweaks for it. And there's room for up to 10 systems. There's also at the very top a system stats lookup. This allows you to look up any system that's currently in the ship or in my spreadsheet and bring up the stats for it. So you can use it as an example or even copy it into system 1 through system 10 so that you don't have to retype all this information. You can just copy it and then modify it. There's user system 1 and on. Now each of these has multiple performance listings. It can have up to 3 performance listings that display different values. In this case, this is a plasma cell, which is a type of engine, or a type of, not engine, but a type of propulsion system. And it has the G's of thrust and the delta V miles per second that it can achieve. So it has 2 performance listings, one to show the G's, one to show the delta V, and of course it also has the cost. The cost goes up with tech level, or up with size modifier, I should say. So bigger size plasma mirrors are more and more expensive. However, the thrust and the delta V do not change with size. So these values stay static throughout. There are some values that don't stay static. For instance, armor DDR. If I choose an armor system, the DDR goes up with size modifier. So that slowly increases. And armor is kind of special too because armor has streamlined and unstreamlined DDR listed. And this particular one is Etherwood. That's one of the ones that provides lift, so it has a lift listing as well. And again, I'll get into what all of this stuff does as I describe each of these sheets. Most important thing at this point is to know that you can take any one of these and then copy it, and it will ask you if you want to copy into the existing one, overwriting it. Then we'll scroll down, and here's all the information copied into this one except for the name. The reason for this is that all systems must have a unique tech level and a unique name. So you need to come up with a unique name for this system that doesn't duplicate one of the existing ones. In this one I copied armor iron, so if I put that in, it's going to conflict with the armor iron that I have up here. We don't want confliction. That's bad. So you need to come up with a unique name. That way it will select out your item. And not just name, but the tech level modifier. So we're going to go on from here to the last tab, which is the auxiliary craft. Now the auxiliary craft listing is specifically for those minor craft, perhaps one-man pods, escape pods, that sort of thing. You don't want to do a full vehicles or spaceships write-up for. But you want to have a listing possibly so that you can install them in your hangar bays or other sections of the ship. So you want to do a quick listing for it. This one allows you to select the skill, the tech level, hit points, handling, health, all the stats for it, including crew requirement and troop strength, and then add it to your ship as an auxiliary. And this, just similar to the design table, this one allows you to save craft into one of the save sheets and then load it back into this sheet, and of course has a reset button so that you can clear it all out and start a new ship. Well, that's the general overview of each of these. And I'm going to come back through and I'll do some in-depth overviews of each section as I get time.